Good morning and welcome to Frontiers of Knowledge segment of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. You are terrified. I understand. COVID-19 is terrifying and the number of deaths and now the prospect of third wave engulfing the globe is really a matter of worry. But then if we look at it as something natural, as something which is more of a cleansing agent of the nature, I'm worried, but I'm still more worried about other things. What amazes me is that the scientists have come up with the deadliest viruses that are being ignored. Not that there's no treatment for them, not that they have not come out with them, but their death are much more than coronavirus. And the leaders and the people, as a matter of fact, are all in a state of denial. We fully accept the fact that the human beings have been battling viruses long before our species had even evolved into modern form. For some viral diseases, vaccines and antiviral drugs have been there and they have allowed us to keep infections from spreading wide. And many times, some diseases have had such vaccines that they are practically eradicated. For example, smallpox is no longer there. And yet there were news recently that there had been smallpox cases in at least three more countries. So even when they had abolished a disease, it keeps on resurrecting. And let me very clearly tell you that we are a long way away from reading the word from the viruses. People recover from one virus and the other is waiting in the wings. And now there are 12 deadliest viruses which are already afflicting the world. But because of the widespread news, they are being ignored. And in recent years, basically, we have seen another phenomenon. The viruses have jumped from animals to the humans and triggered sizable outbursts, claiming hundreds of lives, maybe thousands. The viral strain that drove 2014-16 Ebola in West Africa kills up to 90% of the people infected. Now, in coronavirus, it's 2.6% of the people who die. In Ebola, 90%. And that is why Ebola is the most lethal virus. But then there are other viruses which are equally deadly, and some are still deadlier. Some viruses, like the coronavirus currently driving around the ground, have lower fertility rates, but they are a serious health problem because there's no way as yet to combat them despite the vaccines. And the efficacy of those vaccines is still in doubt. So there are 12 worst killers based on the likelihood that a person would die if infected by one of them. And the sheer number of the people they have already killed, these 12 viruses constitute a growing threat. And it is time that the medical fraternity and the able leadership is able to take preventive steps. The first virus that I'm worried about is Marburg virus. Now, Marburg virus was first identified in 1967. And you will be asking me why it is not so well known as corona is. It was in a small outbreak. It happened to the lab workers in Germany who were exposed to infected monkeys imported from Uganda. And Marburg virus is similar to Ebola. Both cause hemorrhagic fever, meaning that the infected people develop high fever and bleeding through the body. Result: shock, organ failure, death. Mortality rate is minimum 25%, but in its outbreak in Congo, Angola, it was 80%. And it happened recently, about 20 years back, in 2000, the millennial year. 80% people who were infected with Marburg died. The second is Ebola. The first known Ebola happened in Congo and Sudan in 1976, and it spreads through contact with the blood or other body fluids or tissues from the infected people or the animals. The known stages are dramatical in their deadlines. And as a matter of fact, their deadliness, as I said earlier, 90% of the people will die. One strain, Ebola reston, doesn't even make people sick. Can you believe it? You have that virus, you don't feel sick, and lo and behold, you start bleeding. The fatality rate is 50%, and it is 71% if you have got the Sudanese strain. Now, with the coming in of the refugees, I'm not against the refugees being given refuge, and the say, increased migration, global travel, these viruses are capable of coming to the other parts of the world from where they did not be. The outbreak of this virus, Ebola, in West Africa began in 2014. And according to WHO, it is the most complex outbreak till date. The third, rabies. There is a rabies vaccine. These vaccines were introduced in 1920, but it is rare in the world, this rabies. But there is lot in Africa, lot in parts of Asia. Rabies destroys the brain, is deadly disease, and the problem is that if you get vaccinated, then and antibodies are there against the rabies, then you are treating. Otherwise, 100% death. Fatality is 100%. The next virus, which worries me, is HIV. As a matter of fact, I consider it the deadliest virus. Even today, it's the biggest killer. WHO knows it, scientists know it. The disease was first recognized in 80s, and more than 32 million people have died. 32 million people. As a matter of fact, it's the biggest life-taking virus, and it continues to devastate low and middle income countries where 95% of HIV infections take place. Nearly 1 in every 25 adults in Africa is HIV positive. So you should be. Smallpox. In 1980, World Health Assembly declared world free of smallpox. But by that time, it had killed thousands and thousands. Actually, 1 out of every 3 infected by smallpox is killed. And mortality rates are far higher in populations outside Europe. In 20th century alone, smallpox killed 300 million people. And as I told you, though WHO declared it to be vanished, there have been reports from 3 countries that smallpox has resurrected. When it comes to other parts of the world, You can well imagine. Then there's hantavirus. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome first got attention in 1993, and it was a young Navajo man and his fiancée. They died within days of developing with a shortness of breath. More than 600 people in the US have contracted HPS. 36% people have died. Now, there's a strange fact about this virus. It's not transmitted from a one person to another person, no. People contract it from exposure to the dropping of the infected mice. Yes, so if you are living in an area where mouse is there, and a different hantavirus caused an outbreak during Korean War, and more than 3,000 troops fell prey to this hantavirus, and nobody talked about it. After all, if the soldiers die, they are deemed martyrs. But nobody knows whether they died of bullet or of hantavirus. During it, then the biggest is flu. People don't talk of it, but they are not worried about it the way they are worried of coronavirus. During a typical flu season, 500,000 people, that's 500,000 people would die from the illness every year. And many times the new strain comes, pandemic spreads faster, and the most deadly flu pandemic was, you remember, Spanish flu, which killed more than 50 million people. 40% of the world population got infected at that time. It was in the time of the end of the First World War. And according to the scientists in CDC, I talked with Mullenberger, and he told me that if a new strain of flu found its way in the human population today, this would be much worse than the Spanish flu. So, and it's lurking in the side lane, ready to strike. Dengue. Dengue was first identified in 1950s in Philippines and Thailand, and now it has spread through tropical and subtropical areas of the world. Up to 40% population of the world lives there. This is wide ranging. And as the global warming takes place, this disease, this virus is going to spread. According to WHO, dengue sickens about 100 million people every year. Mortality rate is lower, is 2.5%, but there's a problem. There's a strain of this virus which can cause Ebola-like disease. It's called dengue hemorrhagic fever, and that has a fatality rate of 37%. That's quite high. A vaccine was approved in 2019, and it is for the use of the children from 9 to 16, but still not being used as effectively as it should be. As a matter of fact, those who have not caught the virus before could be put at the risk of developing. Now, this is a problem with this vaccine for dengue. If you had dengue earlier, then you can have this vaccine. But if you had one, then if you receive a vaccine, it's going to make the situation worse. So it's only for those who have not had been exposed to this virus. Then there's rotavirus. Rotavirus, two vaccines are available to protect children. The rotavirus is the leading cause of severe diarrhea in the babies and children, and it spreads very rapidly. It is a fecal oral route. Every year, 453,000 children die from rotavirus. Every year, 500,000 children younger than the age of 5 die from rotavirus. Countries that have introduced a vaccine have said that there is a sharp decline. But still, how many countries have it? Only 7. SARS. SARS was first noticed in 2002 in Guangdong province of southern China. Now, have you seen? SARS, COVID, all have come from China. Now, SARS spread to 26 countries in the world. More than 800,000 people died in a couple of years. The disease causes fevers, chills, aches, and everything. Mortality rate is 9.6%. And as yet, there is no vaccine, no treatment. However, in the early 2000s, a new strain was seen. Then comes SARS-CoV-2, and this is what corona is. SARS-CoV-2 belongs to the same category as SARS-CoV, identified in December 2019 in the Chinese Taiwan, originated in bats like SARS. So as a matter of fact, COVID is an improvement, shall I call, on SARS as far the words are concerned. And since its appearance, it has infected millions of people all over the world. And I need not talk about it because everybody knows it. Of course, the mortality rate, as I said, is 2.3%, and their vaccines are now there. But then comes another virus, MERS-CoV. MERS-CoV is Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS. It's typical from Middle East. And the first outbreak was in 2012. Another in South Korea was there in 2015. It belongs to the same family as coronavirus and SARS. And it also originated in bats. It affected camels before passing to the humans, and the same results are there. But the mortality rate, 40%. No vaccine. Now imagine much higher fatality rate, and there are no vaccines. So there's no approved treatment for even for corona. So these 12 deadliest viruses are lurking in the bylanes of the society, ready to pounce on the unworried, the innocent. My question is, why the scientific community is not making people aware of the possibilities, and why work is not being done around the clock to save the people from pain, agony, and death which they don't deserve. Are the political leaders listening? Are you listening so that you can tell your leaders, what are you doing about these 12 dragons ready to emit fire and burn us to the worse than the fires of hell? Is there any response? You have to be careful that these deadly viruses can strike any one of us, our dear and dear ones. Better be safe than be sorry. Thank you.